14 PATH, which stands for Predicting Animal Travel Habits. I'm Rebecca Napoli,
I'm William Weston. I'm Connor Gibb.
and we'll be presenting tonight. Okay, so first we'll start off with our research question, and then we're going to analyze the importance of our research within our fields of study, and we'll also do an overview of what we've completed so far and what our final goal with our research and project is. And we'll conclude with advice we have for the freshmen and any questions you guys have. Our research question is, how does landscape exploitation and fragmentation affect the movements of highly mobile animals in a highly dynamic landscape? Our specific focus is the nomadic habits of the Mongolian gazelle and the eastern Mongolian steppe. So why does this matter? Well, from a conservation perspective, there's been a dramatic decline in the gazelle populations in the eastern Mongolian steppe. And over the past century, there's been a 75% reduction in those populations, and mainly due to landscape exploitation, which includes human development within the land. From a cultural and economic perspective, the prevalent culture in Mongolia is a nomadic herding culture, and there's a large reliance on the gazelles for their protein source, and which they need to sustain themselves and their families. And 50% of the Mongolian people depend on the pastoral economy as well, which means they live off the land and depend on it and its resources, as well as the Mongolian gazelle. From an academic perspective, the model we are attempting to create would be a general model that includes human effects on the land and animal movement, and we could apply that to further research as well. Here we have a picture of a gazelle that's stuck in, I don't know if you can see it very clearly there, but it's a barbed wire fence. So there's a fence, Mongolia borders with China and Russia as well, and there's a fence that runs along the border with China, and some of it's barbed wire, and this could either be a fence like that or a fence that is surrounding like a oil rig that's there. And so as you can see, like most of the time, sometimes they can jump and get around the fence, sometimes they can't and get stuck. So it prevents them from getting to viable food resources on the other side of the fence, so which affects their travel habits. How is our research unique? Well, we are attempting to combine individual-based models and artificial neural networks and genetic algorithms on real data, which we have received on the real gazelles in Mongolia. And we are attempting to incorporate a dynamic landscape versus a static landscape, meaning that the factors are changing and that it's often unpredictable with the climate patterns. And also we are attempting to include anthropogenic barriers such as the huts that the Mongolian people live in. They're called gears, and they're often placed erratically throughout the steppe, and also activities such as oil rigs, which you can see there as well.
So ultimately what we're trying to create is a tool that uses data on animal movement, vegetation in the landscape, and anthropogenic fragmentation, and that'll create a behavioral model that hopefully we'll be able to see qualitatively how gazelles will react to this fragmentation. So as Rebecca mentioned before, the landscape is really dynamic. Rainfall is highly variable, and that causes vegetation to appear and disappear with very frequently. So you'll have a grass patch that will grow, and 2 to 3 weeks later, the grass patch will be gone. And studies have shown that gazelles in Mongolia their movement is linked to these grass patches, and it's also been shown that Mongolian gazelles, when they interact with anthropogenic features, they treat them as barriers to movement. So we're trying to understand how that ties in, how the anthropogenic features in the landscape tie into their movement. And with this highly dynamic landscape, we're looking at using a individual-based neural network genetic algorithm to analyze this phenomenon because it's a flexible framework that allows us to look at it and create a robust model. So the different parts of an individual-based neural network genetic algorithm, just an overview, it's individual-based neural network genetic algorithm, or ING, is an individual-based model that uses a neural network to generate a movement decision and is improved over time by genetic algorithms. So an individual-based model, what is that? Right here we just have a mocked up landscape, and you see gazelles in the landscape, and all it means is that these gazelles, they take in environmental data, they process it with the neural net, and then they produce a movement vector. So it's not like the gazelles, there's an overarching statistical function that's generating their movement. They're each as acting as individuals to move around the landscape. The neural network functions very similar to biological neurons. So if you know anything about a biological neuron, it receives inputs, it has a threshold for whether or not it'll fire, and it produces an output. So in our artificial neural network that we're using, it's basically the brain for our gazelles. So it receives inputs, environmental inputs, and then those inputs move on to other neurons in the neural network. And then it determines, we have an activation function which determines whether or not that neuron will pass along input to the output layer. And the output layer is the movement decision. So we have genetic algorithms which operates under the principle of survival of the fittest. So we have the genetic algorithm, each gazelle has a genetic code, and the genetic code modifies how the neural network fires. So we run the model a bunch of times, and each time the genetic code in each gazelle updates based on how well it did, and how well it did is compared to how close it behaved to a real gazelle. So we run the model, and you see on this graphic, behavior that's not at all like a real gazelle will be selected against, and as you move forward through the generations, the gazelle performs more and more like a gazelle.
So, real quick, how we're going to train the model, we're using primarily these things called semi-variance plots, which plot on a time axis the distance that the gazelle has traveled, which has, our mentor has done a lot of research, but that's a very good metric for this sort of gazelle movement data. So we're going to compare semi-variance for our model gazelles against real gazelles, see how they stack up. And primary metrics are going to be time spent so far away from different anthropogenic factors, and how they select the vegetation patch sizes, how green the vegetation is. And we're going to use Kolmogorov, Smirnov, and bivariate K-function tests to do so. Our team workflow, we split up into 3 sub-teams. We've been bouncing between 3 and 4 right now. There's a biological abstraction and data analysis team that works with the actual biological data we have, analyzes that, does primary things to make generalized rules for it. And then a geographical data acquisition team works with all the NVDI and the population data that we have stored, sort of working that, gathering that, working it into the model in a usable format. And the model implementation team does all the coding work where what the other 2 teams have done, they put into the actual functional model and run it. So, progress so far, we finished a thesis proposal last semester, which is good. We acquired data sets on anthropogenic features from 2002, which is slightly outdated, but probably hasn't changed too much in rural Mongolia. We'll show you these in a moment. NDVI data from 2007 to 2012, which isn't fully up to present, but that's the range that our data is in anyways, so this works great for us. We have version 1 of our model done with basic neural network, genetic algorithm running on that. We went to a conference in Florida over the summer actually about agent-based modeling, which was a really good experience for us. Talked to some leading experts in the field on that. We submitted an RU proposal, and we have formed some basic statistical analysis on the movement patterns that we have so far. We'll show you some graphs in a moment. So we don't actually have a video of the model for you guys tonight. We do have a demo of a slightly older version we've been making. Most of the changes we made over the summer and the fall have all been to the math that's going on behind the scenes. So if you guys have seen this before, I don't, but this is very similar to before. Basically, the graphical output right now, you have green is grass, brown is dead, and then masses of black obstacles moving around, assuming the gazelles are blue on this map. So they move around the landscape right now, just eating vegetation and not avoiding the obstacles. And the anthropogenic data set we have looks like this when you display it. Basically, black dots are all town settlements in Mongolia. We have red is all the roadways, and black, either black or white, railways if you can see them. And then, so some little statistic analysis we did to begin with. These are just some plots about basically home range, where the gazelle likes to stay, how closely bundled up to the central location the gazelle likes to stay, how far they'll go for food, with various different x-axes. And some advice to the freshmen. First, don't worry about changing your project. We had some slightly different goals when we started out. Found out those weren't entirely plausible, so we were able to adapt and adjust to that. Going forward, simplify a bit. Baby steps are better than going to be perfect on the first time. We've had this problem with ourselves a couple times, where we want to just make a perfect model on the first run, we hit play, and it just works beautifully. And we're all done, but you really gotta take smaller steps towards your goal. Lots of people are gonna be getting out advice tonight, and I don't know if you're like us, you'll probably ignore half of it to most of it. So they'll probably tell you to even like heed it tonight, but that's still probably the best advice we can give. And then do work you'd be proud of. So we're all proud of the model we have so far. Hopefully we'll be very proud of the final result. So you got 3 years to work on your project, so make them count. And something that's not on the slide, the sub-teams we found really help us. I think Sogren mentioned they have those as well, just to sort of divvy up the work, make sure everyone stays focused, get stuff done. So, quick summary. Fragmentation is critical concern for the gazelles in Mongolia, and we're modeling the gazelle movement using individual-based neural network genetic algorithms. It's a new model, and this will help protect gazelles from exploitation. So, Mongolia. Special thanks to our mentor, Dr. Bill Fagan, and people in this lab, Dr. Thomas Mueller and Dr. Kirk Wilson, who have both given us a lot of advice. And the Gemstone staff, Dr. Frank Paul, Dr. Kristen Kendall, and Ms. Heather Creek, for all the help they've given us this year and last. Any questions?
Once you create the model that can accurately predict the gazelle movement, what do you plan to do with the model? Or do you plan to pass along
So the current plan right now is to use what we developed as sort of a stepping stone that other researchers can come in, either generalize to other species, as we mentioned, or to take what the gazelles run with theirs and become over that. So we're basically just academic ones to build off of.
So, as of right now, the Inner Mongolia territory will become urbanized in the near future, like China is investing heavily into that territory. How do you plan for your model to take into account current changes in the environment of that region? Because it's not going to stay static for a very long time. Although it's a very well-preserved region, but not many people do much there. But it's going to see an influx of more people pretty soon. So how do you collect data?
Well, right now we have a data set that we've been using, and that is one of the issues with Mongolia is a dynamic environment, so and especially with urbanization happening. So I guess potentially for future research, if someone wanted to continue with our final model and use new data of new cities or populations that have inhabited it since the data we have used, that's like a potential branch of research that could go off of our project.
One of the strengths of our model is that it is individual based, so the behavior of the gazelles only depends on react to the landscape you put into there. So if you put a new landscape into there, you will get new gazelle behavior. What the genetic algorithm will do, it will adapt each gazelle behavior to be similar to what gazelles will actually react to. So in our model, the environment is actually an input variable. So if you input a new environment, you will see new gazelle movement reactions, so you can learn new things about how they will move across the landscape.
Why specifically Mongolian gazelle?
That was the particular organism that we had. Our mentor had data on Mongolian gazelle movement that he's been collecting over the past couple of years, so it was a good case study for this particular model.
Right. So you're using individual data models. So for each gazelle, there's like the gazelle looks at the landscape and like they do some calculations and you get an output. So if like you're doing this for presumably like a lot of gazelles, right? So like I feel like that would take a lot of runtime. So you just want that all at once.
So
Not like a week of calculations.
right now, the model, since our landscape, we're starting off with a very small, very basic model for right now, like for the stage we're currently in. So we only have, I can't remember how many exact gazelles we have in the landscape, but it's enough that our machines can run it and be done within a reasonable time frame. For the future, we have access to a cluster at a C-Sync down in Annapolis that lets us run on supercomputers that they have. We will be able to run on. So when we need the power, which we will, that's there for us.
Well, I have two questions. If not, you just answer one.
That's fine. Yeah,
Going off what Akira said, have you heard about swarm theory where you can like model an entire group of like individual thinking animals? It's like one thought process. And then the second question would be, what is like the goal? Like, are you trying to like affect how people organize the environment to better accommodate the animals? Or so,
The conference that we went to was actually called Swarm Fest, so we learned quite a bit about swarm theory, and we considered that as part of like what we would use in our model. And your second question was,
just like, so how do you use like the model you're creating? Like, what's like the real life? Like, are you trying to like adjust where people make villages and stuff?
so the model's a qualitative assessment of how gazelles react to anthropogenic features. There have been other ungulates in the Mongolian landscape. I think a Mongolian donkey that, as a result of anthropogenic features, has been pushed all the way into a certain corner of the landscape and is dying out, or its population is reduced. So we're hopefully being able to maybe even predict that happening to the